Hi there. It's me, Calder, your buddy from NOGD. I'm going to move this a little bit closer into where I'm going to sit. And it's going to be a quick little class on the basics of doing sprite art and exporting sprites into Unity and other programs that you might be making games with. For the basis of this course, I'm going to focus on using Sprite. While I primarily like to use free programs during these classes, I think Sprite is a fairly cheap tool that is very much worth it. If you really want to get serious about making sprite art, I think it's the best tool on the market, bar none. The only competition I ever see from other folks who make sprite art on Twitter is pretty much like Photoshop, but I think this has a lot more upside than Photoshop. And I might even just see if I can show y'all really quick with an older thing I've done on this. Let's see. We'll use the plant GIF right now. So there's a couple of things that makes this a really special thing, and why I want to show you this pretty quickly before we go in here. When we use Sprite, one of the best things it has is this window right here. What does it do? It will give us a constantly updating preview of whatever we are animating over here. So if I wanted to change an aspect of this, let's say I wanted to activate the different kind of dirt that I have here, I can just put it on and off and it immediately changes there. Any change that I do there is immediately reflected into this thing, so you get a constant update of what you're working on very quickly. I think that alone is invaluable. It has excellent onion skinning tools, and what onion skinning is, if you're not familiar with the term, is essentially transparencies of your previous or next frame of animation. This is very useful if you want to have fluid animation, so things that flow into each other look a little bit more clear. You can kind of see how there's a ghost image over here on this stuff. I'll zoom in. And that ghost image is your onion skin. And if you're doing in-between frames between your major keyframes, this becomes a very, very useful tool to kind of see how your motion is flowing in between frames, which is really nice. Yeah, when you see that, you can see how it kind of makes a fluid motion. I was able to kind of go back and see how things look. In addition, you can actually change your onion skins on this, which is something I don't see very often, which I think is really cool. You can change the opacity. I think you can change it so it sits in front as well. Yeah, in front of Sprite. So you can change your opacity and get an image of it in front of your Sprite as well as behind it. And you just have a lot of tools here that really helps with motion when you're doing pixel art. That's these may not seem incredibly useful if you're a novice, but I'm certain that a bunch of animators here probably see that these tools are very, very, very useful. And what really separates these tools into being more useful is usually to get good tools like this, you have to pay a fairly decent amount of money. Sprite, on the other hand, is, let's see, $20 at the most. I mean, really, even if you're doing raster graphics, this isn't bad. You can even import other things in there fairly quickly to check it out. Another thing about it, it's free. There's a ton of plugins. There's a great community for it. It runs on almost anything. I've had this on netbooks before. I just want to say this is one of my favorite programs, and it's why I'll be teaching this class with it rather than a free tool. I also think this is quickly becoming a standard tool, so don't really recommend it, is I guess the gist of this. But at the end of this tutorial, I will also go through how Photoshop works just as well for these things, and how you can do it in derivative tools such as Clip Studio Paint or whatever you really care about. whatever your typical thing is. I've made sprites in Illustrator, I've made sprites in After Effects, Photoshop, Paint, anything, you name it, you can find a way to make sprites in it, just as long as you kind of are privy of how these things work. Anyways, let's get onto it. I'm going to start a new project on it. Sorry, I put my webcam in front of everything. I'm not going to save this. We're going to do new. And first thing we're going to do is you got to think about what you're going to be making, which is very important because the size of your sprite is going to be somewhat dependent on it, your canvas rather. If you're doing environmental art, you want to make a bigger canvas, right? If you're doing character art, you probably want to do a smaller canvas. While there is no hard and fast rule on the size of your sprites, there's not like anyone's going to sit there and poo-poo you on something if it's not of a certain thing. There are like certain weird standards that if you're like making something for another program might run up against it. A lot of people used to like multiply, what's it called? Factors of like, I think it's 4 or 8. Like you've probably seen it, 128, 64, etc. Doesn't really matter because that's not how things work for you nowadays anyways. I like to just go 50-50 for a lot of the grids that I start with. If you want to go higher res than that, that's fine. Sometimes I even go lower. Basically because the more pixels, like the higher pixel density you have, the more work you're going to have to do. And while that might be good if you want to get things to be more detailed and you have a lot of time, oftentimes, especially with pixel art, the reason why you're using pixel art is because you want to get something done and you want to get something moving fast. And the good thing about the sort of mosaic structure of pixel art is it allows you to kind of, I hate saying when like it lets your mind fill in the gaps, but it does sort of allow you to gesture towards how certain things should look rather than going out and filling each individual brush stroke. I just got a text message, I'm sorry. Anyways, that's all a lot to say like try to start small, especially with character artwork. Environmental artwork can be larger, but we're going to be focusing on character artwork today because that probably will have more differentiating factors. And it looks like my stream went down. Okay. Anyways, let's move on. So we're going to do 50 by 50 pixels. We want to use indexed color. I'll go into that in a little bit. Transparency white. Let's see what the advanced options are. Yeah, pretty much that's fine. We're going to be using square pixels, but I think that's a given. But you don't have to do this anyway. So here we are. Part of the reason why you probably use those little grids I just talked about, the factors of 4, is for the sort of internal grid here. So let's just go to 48 by 48. I think that should probably, yeah, see, nice and cozy. So if you've got any little OCD ticks, that's probably going to be it. We chose indexed color palettes because we want to only use a certain amount of color palettes when we're working with it. You don't have to do this. Again, these are stylistic choices I make, but I also find that having a smaller amount of colors makes your work more focused. Makes you kind of understand the importance of your color, and especially when it comes to light and shading, and can really also help when you're doing subsurface animation, which means animation sort of within the outlines of your sprite. It is useful to have a good sort of network of colors, and what I recommend to do that is to go to this palette list website. There are a ton of palette websites. I think a lot of people already know about Adobe Cooler. It's now Adobe Color. It used to be Cooler, but whatever. Where you can sort of create your own and explore a bunch of them. I don't know why they changed from dark theme to this. It's terrible. These things are very useful to make a color palette of what you're working with. However, I like low spec a lot because for pixel art, you can kind of see how it would look. You can see the sort of examples they make. You can, if you follow a bunch of artists, you can see what they use, and it kind of sometimes you can match your tone fairly well. For the purposes of what we're going to be doing right now, I'm actually doing something kind of sporty. So we're going to want to probably have a good greens for the grass field, yellow for goalposts, good primaries for team jerseys and stuff like that. So honestly, I like the Sweetie 16 here. I don't think I'm gonna have that much sort of lighting differential, so that might be good, but you know, let's say for the purpose of just making simple sprites and not having too many things on this particular tutorial series, we're going to go just down to an 8 color sprite sheet. And we'll use pollen 8 here. We're going to download the palette file. This will kind of depend on what you use to import it. See, we can have the Photoshop, the Paint, the GIMP, hex file, open an app. If I remember correctly, loading palettes from a sprite might even use a proprietary color palette, but let's just see. So we can load a palette. Where did I save my palettes? It's out of my pixel folio. I usually have them. Sorry, I actually don't remember where I put my color palettes on this. Either way, we'll just save them somewhere else. We'll see what color palette thing they want to use. Use ASE, that's fine. So we'll use an ASE. Let's download Pollen 8 and we'll save it as an ASE. We'll save the file to, let's just, for me it's going to be pictures, just so it's easier to find. Now that we have it, we'll go in, we'll say load palette, and it's slightly important that you do this before you start working, but it's not entirely important, and we'll go over that later just so we can show you like what it is that this does in these sort of circumstances, how it sort of functions. God, I forgot that these Windows things can be really troublesome with finding exactly where your things are. There we are. Let's put on the ASE filter just to find it. Pollinate. Oh, and there's an error. Okay. I think I might be able to find it just by seeing where I saved Lux's thing here. Well, either way, we'll just quickly find how to load it by using the wonderful magic of Google. Load palette a sprite. How to import a palette. Okay, how to open an app. A sprite. Okay, download your palette in palette. So I think I found how to do it in A sprite again, so we'll try again. We will download the palette via a PNG. We'll just do it one time. Whoops, we don't want it that small clearly. We're going to save link as. All right, we're going to try it again. Load palette, PNG. It should be pollen. And there we are. If you want to know why that worked so wonderfully lickety-split, if we see this tiny little palette down here and zoom all the way in, it's literally just a collection of all those colors together. So basically you're just showing it the only way it could derive the color set from that palette, and as a result you have the palette. What is important is then now find, I'm just going to save that. Sometimes Sprite likes to have like one individual sort of thing that isn't, it's like it's a null, it's a mask color really, and I always find this really irksome. But it's alright. We can sort of manage this a couple of ways. I believe we can duplicate the color sheet, or we can do this, get really close to it, and just add it. something that's like indecipherably close but not exactly it. The middle mouse button will add that and basically make a mask of your selected color palette. I don't love this feature that it starts at least that way, but it's alright. Anyways, now on to everything. You're going to want to start with whatever's closest to black. Actually, just for the purpose of this thing, let's just make a black. What I'm doing right here is, in the color palette, you'll see when I don't have a color, this little exclamation point will show up. And you can press that to add it to your color palette. It's pretty simple. Anyways, we're going to start with black. And we're just going to make a neutral pose of a character. This is going to be sort of standard art school kind of things, but what you want to do is not really like immediately focus on details, but try to work on a decent silhouette. So I'm making a big old football player guy. Let's say make it a little bit of an exaggerated oval head here. We're going to move it. Let's give him a little, like, that little weird grid thing he has as a mouth. Start from, like, over here, maybe. Sort of go down there. That's fine. And then we're going to move, add a little pixel here. Sort of follow it over here. And just sort of follow a pattern to reach it to that last portion. Same here. I like to try to mirror what I'm doing in terms of making that sort of length. So yeah, we got our helmet kind of. We're gonna say he has a weird visor or something on the front of it too. Maybe the helmet like actually sort of starts up there, so you know you have where the guy sees everything from. And we're just gonna keep working this way. Add another layer so I can sort of create some of these details I want to do immediately, but as I said, you don't have to. None of this is really important. You just kind of want to get a basic shape. Since I'm giving this guy a gigantic head, he's going to have a very little body. That's, I guess, by design. So let's just give him a little funny little pill body, and let's give him these big, silly, brawny muscles. A little further down. We're going to make it just a little bit lower so we can see the individual sort of effects. Alright, so the thumb will be on top. So we go up, up. And we won't worry about the knuckles too much because we'll be able to fix that later on. Anyways, one big beefy arm. It's a little silly right now, we can fix it later. And another big beefy arm. It is important to kind of remember when you're working in pixel art that since you do have sort of a lesser amount of moving parts to deal with, these primitive shapes are super useful. You can always go back and make it more malleable and closer to what you want it to look like. So we're going to give him a big old silly foot. And, you know, actually let's just give him both neutral, regular old bump, 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 bump. And there's a foot. And your style may differ. It's fine. There is no pixel art style as much as I think some people would like to think there is. Whatever you want something to look like in pixel art is fine. Honestly, what I'm making right now is definitely not within my normal style, but you know, always fun to make little experiments and see where things go. Let's push everything in just a little bit. we have a very basic shape here. Since we have our two things, I'm going to merge the layers, flatten them, and we're just going to start adding small little detail. One of the things that's pretty normal in pixel art, I would say almost standard, is an outline that sort of contains everything. I wonder if I just delete this? You know, I thought so. Within that outline, you kind of create all the other sort of things that you want to have. Let's say this guy's team is going to be, I don't know, red, like this. And we'll give him, let's give it the bright red, and we'll use this as a sleeve ends. Well, his team's red. That's just what we're going to know about. He's going to be on the red team. I feel like there's always like different colored pants stuff. He'll be red and green with the Christmas team. Red and blue, hot and warm. It'll be the McDonald's team. There he goes. We'll give him a little McDonald's. Alright. Remember, I'm not too worried about it being perfect or not. I just like getting an idea of what this guy's going to look like. That's why I color a little bit on my first base sprite before I kind of go in and do a whole lot of work afterwards. I like to get an idea of the personality of what I'm making right now. So I'm just going to make tiny little adjustments here, a little bit of shading, just to make him look a little bit more like the person we want him to. Let's give him, sure, why not? Well, I kind of wish we had more than one standard outline color at the moment. We'll add that in later. So here he is, football guy. Let's give him little yellow or red accented shoes on the McDonald's team here, and we're actually going to definitely add another brown here. That might not even be the skin tone we go with. Might be just a little bit too, because we don't have a lot of gradation here, right? You can kind of see that in terms of our skin tones, this palette isn't necessarily the best for it. Let's see if we can make it better. All right. This is starting to make sense. And we'll start to kind of see how an outline can work. We're going to go in here, do that, but we're going to leave this last portion still black. And I'll give him a strong outline. A big part about why you want strong outlines is because once you go into motion, outlines can definitely keep like your the silhouette of movement you're going for is just going to look stronger with an outline. It'll make the motion sort of seem more typical of what it should look like, and people's brains won't get all mixed up on like how the sort of weird in-between frames are going to look like. In-betweens are the frames between your keyframes. Your keyframes are the major poses of what you want things to look like. We'll get into that fairly shortly. So gonna give him a little bit of that weird little grid on there. Again, we got ages to fix this up and clean it up. We just want to get something in here for right now. I like giving things highlights, so you know what? Why don't we just do this, and then we can give it. It's kind of messing up a rhythm here as well. So we're gonna do. I see. We're still on the ink tool. We're gonna sit and yeah, it makes sense. Let's use this. We're probably gonna change the color here as well later on to be a little bit brighter, so we can use this brown to be the sort of darker tone. But for right now, we're just going to boom, 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 just add some stuff. And since the helmet obviously doesn't like go right on the top of the head, we're going to push the outline in a little bit right here. And yeah, it's got a better profile now. There we go. And we're getting there. It's not, you know, perfect yet, but we're fine with it. And that's like kind of something I also really appreciate about a lot of pixel art and stuff like that, and even just digital art in general, is that things typically can just be worked on to a larger degree. It's often less demotivating than like traditional ink on paper stuff, where you can make destructive choices that you can't like go back on. Where digital art, there's a lot of non-destructive pathways to sort of make what you want and not have to worry about like, oh god, I made a wrong brush stroke and now the whole thing I was working towards is ruined. That doesn't happen as much, thank God. So these darker tones, it's going to go underneath the helmet a little bit. You know, I kind of wish, well yeah, we can probably use this. So the rim has a little extra light and the part underneath it doesn't. And then from here, I'm going to use this on the underneath here. This isn't perfect lighting. I've never been super strong at lighting, to tell you the truth, but I'm sure many of y'all can probably already tell. But we're starting to get a sort of silhouette that looks like what we want. And the other thing that's good about the pixel preview here is we can see it on the size that it might show up in game, right? This is a very zoomed in sprite. This is not going to be reflective of how we want things to look in game, because it's just going to be way smaller. So we're just going to work within here until we get to sort of the point that we want things to see smaller, and we'll look at it smaller then. But luckily we have our preview here, so we can look at it and kind of tell just what it looks like at the moment. And you see, like, I added this little outline here, and I don't think it looks good. At that smaller level, I think it makes that look worse. So we're gonna take it out. We're gonna do a little bit of dithering here. What dithering is the sort of blending of color through pixelization. Dithering was used a lot more back in the day, as they say, because televisions then just fundamentally, like an old CRT, fundamentally looks different in how it sort of takes on color and light and resolution. It's a much lower resolution, so the colors, when you do a technique like this, blends, as well as the colors sort of bleed into each other a lot more, so it creates a bleed. Nowadays, dithering is definitely a stylistic choice. Typically, if you're doing a dither pattern, you just want it to match no matter what. And you see it kind of creates a soft shadow. Think of it as a gradient if you're used to that sort of terminology. Except, like, clearly it's not, but it can create a sort of shaded effect between two polar sort of extremes. Similarly, we can do the same thing on the top of this helmet. I'm saying him, it could be anyone. That's kind of what I wanted to do with this. I was thinking about not even really following too many sports designs, because I like the idea of like just very non-sporty sport players in this game. But we can already see how this is like a far stronger helmet than it was before, right? Especially like at this level, like we're starting to get that sort of character motion. We're also seeing that these yellow outlines maybe aren't necessary. The rhythming here is definitely off, so we're going to work on sort of taking that out, and we're going to probably add this in here, and we're going to erase this bit here. Yeah, definitely stronger that way. And I would say we're getting to a point where this is looking like a little football guy. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with the helmet so far. And as you can see, like, this process is definitely looked a lot rougher beforehand, right? This was not exactly what we wanted there. But just through doing a few little casual tweaks and tiny little choices, we have a stronger profile that at this point at least definitely looks like a helmet. You might be able to argue that it doesn't look like a football helmet, in which case I'm sorry, it's been a while since I've watched the big game that way, but I think it kind of gets the point across, which is all you really need at certain things, especially at like smaller sizes here. We got a decent little guy right here. You know what, let's add that as well. Okay. What we could do is add a highlight on the top. You see, that's sort of imperceptible, but at the same time, like, imperceptible is good. We start to get in trouble when we really notice the pixels. When like you don't see the sort of banana rim top, that's great. But also, this is my personal opinion. Clearly, if you have a different sort of perspective on pixel art, that's absolutely valid. Let's give him like one very pretty blue eye. Oh, a green eye? I was thinking like that. I don't really know if I know anyone with green eyes. Maybe just because like what we think are green eyes are very, you know, very much not green, but whatever. Not entirely relevant. I like to always give eyes that for some reason just sort of shoot off. I just think it's cute. So, sue me. For such small of eyes though, I don't know if we need whites. Well, let's make them bigger. And this is kind of part of the process too, is finding out how things look at a certain level. It's kind of funny because it looks like he just has a fucking giant grin, which is maybe not what we want to do, so we'll try to bring the eyes in a little bit. The sort of super deformed eyes might not be working. So don't mind that. I live in some sort of horrible wedding landscape, and just these people are always make terrible noise. Yeah, there's an eye. Alright, we're not going to focus on this too long because obviously we only have so much time and I don't want to waste y'all's. But I'm going to say for right now, this is a decent base. We're going to do some of the same stuff here, and we're going to sort of clean up this area so you can see it sort of bridges into his neck better. We can suggest the sort of shoulder line by just adding more of this here. So you have like a tiny little neck here. Typically, I would maybe try to find another intermediary. I would often, you know, say that it's not always a good idea to mess with your palette too much. But, you know, all rules are meant to be broken. If you feel like your stuff would look better if you did, do it. Because ultimately, like, yeah, make things the way you want it to look. Yeah, we have like a sort of a low light rim now. I don't like his neck being this thick, so we're gonna push it in a little bit, grab it, move it here, similar over here. And I think what we can do here is also just sort of do that. At this point, I don't know how much I like his arms being these sort of goofy things, but we'll sort of work through it. And all this is just pretty much get an idle stance. Funny thing is he's not going to be holding a football, so I don't know if I'm going to be adding that to his idle stance. But we're essentially working towards what we can use as a base reference pose for the rest of his motion. And that's what you'll want if you're making character design. You want something that you can go back to, reference, look at, and then when you move forward, be able to sort of go back to if you want to have different animations. I like to keep sort of sharp pixel boundaries on this. Or, you know, whatever else you might think is appropriate. Okay, we can probably move this in. He doesn't need that jagged of a thing. If we're gonna have this, we should smooth that a little bit so the sort of slide into this isn't as drastic. Put that here. Let's give him just a little bit of an armpit here. And we'll have a hard drop off on this. Sorry, I'm technically on listening to Spotify right now, and I just had one of those weird ads that scolds people for, like, you know, if you really want to be saving money, maybe you don't spend stuff on that extra cup of coffee, which is like such a strange thing to scold people on, in my opinion. Like, jeez Louise, coffee ain't that expensive, and let people have slight nice things. I don't really love the silhouette here. We might completely rework his arms later, but that's not the point of this tutorial. Though you do want strong key poses, I obviously don't want to waste your time. So let's just sort of not let okay be the enemy of good. Just sort of work towards getting a workable silhouette instead of a perfect silhouette. Alright, I'm looking at the time now too. We're gonna kind of wrap things up. So we're gonna add some slight shading to his pants. We don't need these black lines anymore. Similarly, easy way to sort of make separations between stuff is just use your highlight or your low light in between the black frames on your next things. So there he is, little football guy. Yeah, it didn't work how I wanted. Alright, there we go. Little football man. He's got a big old hand, he likes to play football in his football land. God, I don't love these arms, but that might make more sense. Well, yeah, this is easy enough that we can just kind of fix it this way. He's a little football man. So we've gone from a basic silhouette to something that is at least more substantial and closer to what we want to look for when we were making this guy before. Like, it looked kind of rough and shambly before, and while this is not something I would necessarily consider, God, I hate saying this, but by my standards, what I would probably want to finish with, it is good enough, for the purposes of this tutorial and to go on to our next sort of step, which is animation. I'm just going to do one last thing and make sure that this little line is still strong here. So let's sort of make this line here. Alright. Oh gosh. This arm here. I just gotta... I don't know. Let's move it up, over, and over there. And then we'll finally let it be. Okay. Reminder that if you're using a selection tool like that in any program, that you have to deselect it before you go forward. Alright, there's a little man. He's got a goofy giant eyeballs. He's got his helmet on. He's in some sort of running stance. We'll even just give him like little bottoms of his cleats. Well, we should probably also, you know, include the bottom in his outline. Blink. There we go. He's a guy, he goes for runs. One of the fun things about that, we're going to save, obviously. You should always save. Little football guy. Little football guy here. We're going to change his palette. And this is why, I'm going to demonstrate what index palettes do. So let's say that we didn't like our palette for whatever reason. Let's find another small palette, something that's around 8. We load it in, and it'll obviously immediately change the colors to something else. Now he's a purple weird guy. Honestly, man, I kind of like that. Press remap, and it'll try its best to approximate the color of what your old palette looked like. But it won't always do a good job. If you want it to do a good job at that, you want to look for palettes that are similar to the one you're using. And so ours was sort of bright and faded. If there are more colors, that'll work pretty well too. The Pico 8 palette might do decently. Yeah, Pico 8 palette did a great job here. And honestly, like even makes it look like an entirely different kind of platform, right? Which is kind of cool. And you can really easily kind of go in and work on this stuff in different palettes this way. To tell you the truth, I like this enough that I'm going to save it as a fork. Little football guy, Pico 8. And I can also use it to show y'all another fun feature about a sprite. And if you want to go back to the old palette, just press Ctrl Z. It undoes just like everything else. So we go to FX, Outline, and we can outline pretty much just like that. We choose an outline color we want. Let's say this purple or blue is good enough. And look, he's already got an outline again. It's pretty easy. It helps you kind of work faster. Working faster is always good when you're working on anything, so just keep that in mind. And what you would probably do now is then sort of clean up. Just see the colors that don't match, like the brown is kind of weird as a part of that because it matches the skin tones here, and the sort of gray, black isn't ideal. I would, you know, sometimes instead choose that over that sort of gray. But that's not necessarily too important. Yeah, I think that looks stronger. Yeah, I think that's in general better. His legs are a little funky right now, but we already talked about that. Anyways, now that he's got that here, we have our basic outline, and let's go to the next part. So for this guy, he's pretty much just going to be going left and right in my game. Nothing more complex than that. So we're going to add a new frame. And when it makes a new frame, it's going to copy your first frame. Sometimes it's really helpful if you want to do very small changes to your last thing. So like, let's say all I really wanted to do was change the arm and rotate a little bit. We can sort of cheat out animations by like literally just sort of using the rotate tool. It doesn't do great at this scale because it's trying to interpolate like small changes. But we can also see the differences right here. So if we want to doctor these things afterwards, we can go in, follow our onion skin, do that. But that's just sort of a basic outline of what we do. What we should really want to do when we do something like this, and it might bother some people, but is get rid of it. And we're going to pause this right now so it's not going to distract us. We want him to probably be in his next keyframe. So when we're thinking of running, we probably want his knees up. So let's do that. We'll move this knee. And if we don't want, if we like want a certain rhythm to follow, it's sometimes more useful to use that. And we'll put this leg down. And we'll add this leg down as well. And since his arm is already forward in this sprite, we're going to sort of curl it inward. And we're going to bring this arm up. Checking on the time right now. Not going to do too many frames and not going to get like the perfect animation here. But the idea is to kind of just do a quick animation, and then, you know, you guys can figure out what to do based on what your art style is or how much you want to sort of add into a character like this. Gonna do and do. We're gonna move this up just a little bit because we do sort of go up when we run. All right, and I'm gonna do, just to save myself some time here, which is also totally fine. Sometimes your frames, since you're using digital art, not hand-drawn animation, are going to reuse all the assets. So we're going to, whoopsie, copy this. We're going to paste it in place. Well, I think it always pastes in place, which is rad, honestly. And that works for me. Since we wanted this guy to go up a little bit, we're going to take this frame. We're going to move it up. We're going to move the whole thing up a little bit now. And since his profile is shrinking, we're getting a little bit of squash and stretch upwards. These are animation fundamentals that you will probably learn later on, but don't worry about it right now. And we're going to do some quick... You can look between the two of those and see that maybe this elbow is a little too jagged on his arm. So I'm just going to... And that would be better. All right, that's one frame. And then we'll do, honestly, we might even just do a duplicate frame from here. So frame, new frame. And we're just going to lower his leg on the other side and lift this leg on the other side. So again, luckily we have onion skinning. Let's delete all this. And I think a lot of people, myself included for a while, might be scoffing at the idea of immediately deleting all of your stuff. But sometimes you just get cleaner frames. Just by going new. So we're not going to worry too much about how things are going to be perfect. We're just going to get there, right? can already see potential problem, but we're not going to worry too much about that. In fact, let's just move this right here. We're going to pretty much mirror our onion frame on this frame. And once again, we're going to move this arm back up. You might look a little silly, but silly's fine. It's a video game. Since there might be some overlap, we'll just accommodate it. Okay, let's see. To me, that says we might. Okay, so duh, 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 duh. And what happens if we need an in-between frame between these two, probably? Duh, 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 duh. I think we can actually make a preview between these two frames. Well, we don't have to worry about setting loop sections. Honestly, I never set loop sections, so we're just going to have to find a way to delete it. You know what we can do? Duplicate. Let's see. Let's make a new frame. Let's copy this frame, paste it here, and yeah, so that's definitely going to need to be a new thing. This will be like the startup frame. This will be one frame that's further off. So startup to flatten to the reverse. So we can actually use this startup frame pretty easily to add to our thing, since he pretty much has the motion we want in here. And we can erase this bit. And curl his legs in. Keep the arm while sort of solidifying his knee. It might be a little thick, so we can make things smaller here, as well as here. Yeah, and that's probably a tighter sort of thing. So duh, duh, duh. No, I'm beginning to see a lot of the issues with this, but that's all right. Down. Tell you what we can do is make this tighter as well, and make this leg straighter. As well as put this arm a little into the chest. And it's important to know that animation is sort of a process. It takes a little while. But until we see good motion, we just kind of keep working on things, right? Hut, hut. Let's just take these two. Frame. New frame. We'll make a couple new frames. Frame, new frame. We just press Alt-N to save ourselves some trouble. Copy these two, paste them here. Let's see what that loop looks like. We're starting to see that it has a little jog. Really, it's the startup frame making things look a little weird. But no matter. That's not necessarily super important right now. What is important is sort of showing you all how to export this stuff. Alright, first unselect this. We're just going to delete this, and we're going to move everything in. And since I want this class to be short, we're not doing the full fill-ins for everything. Obviously, you would then go in and fill every aspect of it. But since this is a tiny class, we're not going to do that. We're going to go in, take our two frames. We're going to remove the frames that are redundant because we want our sprite sheet to be super, super condensed. Let's see. Frame. Delete frame. Good. Turn off our onion skinning and move our loop to add this. Part of it is, yeah, animation does not usually take an hour. It takes a long time. It doesn't matter what the loop thing is. So, I mean, really what we could do is... We're not doing that. Anyways, we're not worrying about how the animation's incomplete at the moment. Obviously, it would take more time. What we are going to do is export this. We're going to go to Export Sprite Sheet, and you'll see it generate this little grid where there's three of him, right? There's him at neutral, him moving, him moving. That's perfect. That's all we want. The layout, we can choose horizontal, vertical, by rows, by columns. This will matter more when you have a whole lot. You could potentially have a sprite sheet with, like, I don't know, 6 different variations of a run or 8 different types of actions. We're not doing that right now. I'm not going to go through a run cycle at the moment. Maybe we can have a run cycle class in another day. This is just here to kind of show y'all how to export this stuff once you have something you like. You can do border padding. That sometimes matters with the stuff you're bringing in. For here, it's not. We're just going to save it as little football, little guy sheet export. I always like that export and stuff like that. You don't have to. That'll be the export file. All right, and it's exported. Now we're going to open Unity. We're going to import new asset. We're going to find our guy. So I saved it over here. Little guy export. And there we are. He's in there. You can see his outline. There's the 3 of him. And we're going to want to go to Sprite, 2D and UI, Sprite Mode Multiple. And what I made sure to install, and you should probably install if you want to use sprites in Unity. I think this stuff is way more useful than doing this differently. Go to your package manager. Make sure that you go to package in Unity register and look up Sprite, and you'll see 2D Sprite. Install that. Mine says remove, but if it wasn't installed, it would say, you know, it would not be grayed out. So we have it installed. We're going to go to our guy, go to Sprite Editor, and we're going to need to slice this up. It's pretty easy to do slicing. You just pretty much grid by cell size or grid by cell count. We know that we have 3 columns, and we know that this is evenly spaced, thankfully, because that's what the program did. I have no idea what the hell is going on with the color here, but you know, some things just end up being weird. And we'll press slice, since we have 3 columns and they're 3 different things. Now they're sliced into different little sheets. Press apply, and we have an animation that actually sort of functions with it, with each individual sheet there. And that's how you get them in there. How you make an animation with the sprite sheet might be a little bit different. Since it makes these 3, we pretty much have to tell it where to sequence within the sprite sheet that we've made. We'll see that they're all called little guy export 1, 2, 3. And you'll basically tell Unity that I want to use the animation between 1 and 2. Or I wanted to just kind of go between, I don't know, 1 and 3. Or if I want to use the whole thing, we do 1 through 3. I'm sorry if I'm sort of rushing this, because I want to make sure that we can get into how to do this in Photoshop very quickly as well. So teaching you how to do this in Photoshop is hopefully teaching you how to do this thing just in general. So we're going to do this super quick. We're going to do an even easier thing than we did before. Thank you for my, thanks Piz. Okay, so new file. Again, doesn't matter the size, since we're actually going to be doing this to show off how you can do big sprites. So 256 by 256. Try to have something like this. It's gridded and small, so you can kind of work with it. What I like to do is have my layer, have my artboard, and we're going to make a quick little goofy goober. So eyes, mouth, there he is. Give him a little, you know what, I like to have more goofball eyes than that. He's a silly fella. Look at him go. So that's our first frame. What's easy to do in Photoshop, I just add another layer. If I want to have the same onion skinning effect, I lower the opacity on this layer. I would lock it, though I swear to God, yeah, whenever they update this thing, they make it more difficult to find the layer. Let's make him open his mouth real tall. And we'll sort of make him close his eyes a little bit. And we'll stretch his eyes as well, actually, so. And then let's add another frame. I'm sorry if this is kind of rushed. We'll make this frame invisible. We'll lower the opacity on this frame. And we'll have him chomp down. We'll squash it a little bit. Actually, we'll squash it even more. We'll look at our original frame. We want to make them wider than that, so. Since we have all of our wonderful layers intact, we can sort of get a better idea of how much we can squash them. We'll sort of follow the eyes here. And let's round out his little head a little bit, so. I'm getting a little satisfied smile. And we'll give them one more that's basically just a neutral. And from here, since we don't want the tall one, we'll just add these two. Doing the opacity changes again. You should have layer opacity in pretty much any tool you use. You just have to look it up. Again, we'll lock these layers to make sure that we're on the layer we want to work on. And we'll do an in-between of these two shapes really quickly. Which will just be like right here, I would say. Maybe not just that. Sorry, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist sometimes, even though I guess the point of this is to not be one at the moment. We'll give them just a tiny little smile now. Here. Right. So we have a series of things with the little guy. What kind of sucks here is like the best way to kind of see this animation right now is to just turn all the opacities back up. Right? And I think there are ways to export GIFs. So you could check that way, but yeah, it's just kind of a pain. I hate how this sort of works within Photoshop, but you know, some people do it this way. And we can just go duh, 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 duh. All right. We have our layers set up. Cool. We have 4. We might be able to actually export as an animation. They change the export process in this thing so much that we're just not going to give a shit about that. We know that the size of this is 256 by 256. If you want to make a horizontal row of that, I found this out and it rules. You do times 4, times 4. Well, actually we don't need the other one times 4, so we're just going to do a horizontal row. So file new, let's do 256. And easy way, we can also sort of make sure that this is the way we want in terms of size is actually easier way to do this is go into here, file. I think we can generate grids and cells. Maybe not. If you're a Mac, you can literally just look up create grids and cells. I swear to God, every time I do something, man, they change it up just a little bit. These are like, it's trying to chase a moving target when it comes to knowing what Photoshop will put where in the future. Let's just do a quick little lookup. Creating grids, Photoshop. Go to view. I don't want to do that. Well, if it works that way, view, show, and choose. Oh my God, that doesn't exist. Does it say view grid? Oh my God. I don't want a perspective grid. Alright, view. Where is show, man? Grid. Neat, we have a grid here. View. Snap to. Grid. Edit. Preferences. Where is that? Grid guides and slice. Since we have that grid line every pixels, we'll do 256, and now we have our handy little guide. Okay. All right. For the purposes of this little tutorial, we're going to do a really quick little thing we can do, and we're just going to draw along the outlines here. There are easier ways to do this. You could use a fill, but if we do it this way on each one of these layers, you know what? Even easier way, make it fucking big. And we'll change the color on here. Actually, we'll keep the color. Same with this, keep the color. Whoopsie, try not to do that. There are definitely better ways to do this, but this is just my quick and dirty way so I can get to work. all, you know, leave no disclosure here. And here we go. We have 3 little guys. Quick thing you can do for any Photoshop project, you can bring layers in between other projects. So we can just bonk him in here, move him to 1 grid, click back here. Since he's actually our layer 4, we'll put him at the last. But the snap to also helps us make sure that that fellow will be right in our grid. Layer 3. And you can kind of see what I'm doing, right? I did the same thing of generating a sprite sheet, but I did it in this way instead, just so I could show you that you could do this in any program, essentially. We're going to flatten this really quick. We're going to make sure also the merge layers. And this is a quick and dirty way to do it. Better ways would just be to select the color range that's not black and white. Actually, you can just do this. Select color range, not here, and crank the fuzziness up. Select inverse. Gone. Neat. So we have our sprite sheet. We do the same thing. File, export. We can just do quick export as PNG because it'll take it as a sprite sheet too. Muncher. We'll go into Unity. File, import new asset. Muncher. And the same general thing. We go in here. We change it to Sprite. We change it to multiple. Sprite Editor. Apply. Slice. We have 4 now, so we do 4. Slice. And look, he's all sliced up. Apply. Good. Usually there's a way to read white as alpha. So alpha is transparency. So it looks like we accidentally added white into here, or at least our quick export did not decide to make the outlines white. We can go export as if we want to do something like this. Transparency, PNG. It's strange because it should be showing a transparency. Either way, that's something you can do on your own time. I can't have to get to work in just a couple minutes. But yeah, we can see now that we have the same sort of thing. And if you wanted to do a different program, you want to do a different art style, and you wanted to do a similar way to export this stuff into Unity, you would already have pretty much the same way to do it. And look, we can actually kind of you can see him munch. Alright, anyways, that's basically how you can make sprites, how you can import them quickly, a little bit of pixel art knowledge, and how you can do it in other programs. Thanks for watching, y'all. I know this is a little bit rushed, but a little slapdash, and maybe the art wasn't perfect. But That's not the goal here. The goal is to just show you how to do it, and now you gotta get to work. Thanks for listening, thanks for following in, and I will maybe do a bigger animation sort of thing in the near future. Anyways, happy jamming, y'all.